You guys already know what time it is. It is monthly reading wrap-up time, so let's talk about the books that I read in June. That's a very precarious pile there. Welcome back, friends. I have my little reading journal here with all of my notes. First up, how did we do with the monthly TBR? We ended up reading 5 out of the 6 books on the TBR, which I'm gonna take that as a win. The only book that I didn't get to is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. That is also now on my July TBR, so we will never escape The Final Empire until we read it, apparently. I did read a different Brandon Sanderson book though, so that's a win. I read 17 books total this month. One of them was a reread, and 13 of them were from my physical TBR. So 13 books knocked off the physical TBR, which is like, where's my medal, where's my trophy, you know what I'm saying? But let's chat about some of these, shall we? Starting off, the first book that I finished this month was Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. This is the second book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. I think I liked this better than the first one, and I was just overall really pleasantly surprised by this. I just had so much fun with it. In this book, we are following Ada and Weston. Weston is trying to do this renovation of this house that is on the ranch, and he has employed Ada to do that because that is her job. So they have been emailing, setting this whole thing up, planning it out months in advance, and now it is time for Ada to actually go to Rebel Blue and oversee the whole renovation. And the night before she is about to actually head to Rebel Blue, she goes out to like the town pub or the town bar, whatever it's called, and she meets a guy. They have instant chemistry, they make out, and she runs away. Then she turns up to work the next day, first day on the job. Guess who her new boss is? The man from the bar the night before. So now obviously she's like, okay, well, that was very unprofessional of me. I mean, she didn't technically know who he was at the time, but she's obviously like, well, that can't happen again. So they're trying to maintain this professional kind of relationship, and of course they're just really drawn to each other. But I think what I really loved about this is that the plot was really good. Like, I was actually really interested in the whole renovation process and like what was happening, and I also just love the family, like Weston's family in this. So good, very reminiscent of like the Chestnut Springs kind of vibe with the family dinners and like the found family. It's so cute, it's so sweet, and I really enjoyed this more than I thought I was going to, so 4 stars. Then I also read the next 2 books in the Bridge Kingdom series. So I had already previously read book 1 and 2. This is book 3 and 4. Book 1 and 2 follow one couple. Book 3 and 4 follow a different couple. It's still the same world. The guy in this couple is the brother of the girl in the original couple from book 1 and 2. So they're definitely still linked. So the guy in this one is like an heir to one kingdom, and the girl is a general for an army of the other kingdom. So it's very much like enemies to lovers kind of situation, or like rivals to lovers, I guess, or like a forbidden romance, because obviously they are supposed to be political enemies, like they're on opposite sides of the war. And at first they don't really realize who the other person is, so they're able to start this relationship without like the political side of things inhibiting their relationship, I guess. Like, they're just getting to know each other as people without kind of all of the extra bits. But then obviously they realize who each other are, they realize they're supposed to be enemies. So yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of politics in these 2 books and in this series as a whole. I enjoyed these. I gave them both 3.5 stars. Like, I think they're good. I had fun reading them, but they're not like absolute favorites for me. They're not ones that I think I'm gonna really think about much. I haven't really thought about them since I read them at the start of the month, but definitely a good time. I don't think this is a series I'm gonna continue though, just because it doesn't stand out to me. I don't really care that much. I know that there's gonna be more books in the series, but I just feel satisfied. Like, I just don't feel the need to continue the series. But I would recommend it. I think books 1 and 2 are stronger in my opinion, and I just preferred the storyline and the characters in book 1 and 2. Then we have In the Weeds by B.K. Borison, which is a contemporary romance that's part of like an interconnected standalone series. This book follows Evelyn and Beckett. Beckett works at Lovelight Farm, which is like a Christmas tree farm, but they do a bunch of other stuff as well. And he's kind of like the caretaker, I guess. And then Evelyn is an influencer, and they met one night at this like conference thing. They have like a one night stand, and then they go their separate ways, and then they end up bumping into each other again later on in this small town. Again, I guess it's just the classic, we keep getting drawn to each other, but we're also like not sure if this is something we should be pursuing. They obviously have that like physical chemistry, but they're also starting to realize as time goes on that maybe they have more than just a physical connection, which is obviously really sweet. And it's really fun because in this book the town kind of like forces them to be in proximity. Like, one of the ladies from the town basically just pretends that there's no accommodation available in all of the town and that she'll have to stay with Beckett. Like, that is the only option, obviously just because everyone in the town wants them to end up together. So it's just really cute, small town vibes. I liked this, but it wasn't like a favorite of mine. It was probably a little bit too, like, I don't love the whole it started off as friends with benefits and then feelings got attached, or like started off as a physical relationship and then they gained feelings. I feel like it has to, I don't know, it's very rare that that works for me. It does work sometimes, but I just prefer it to be a much more emotional romance, and this still definitely had an emotional element to it, but I don't know, it didn't stand out to me, so 3.5 stars. Next, I picked up Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. I feel like I finished this and literally forgot every single thing that I read because I could not care less about it. It was fine and the premise was good, and honestly the book was fine, but I did not care about what was going on at any point of this book. I have nothing like super negative to say about this. Like, I don't even know why I didn't love it. Like, I wish I could be like, oh, I hated the writing, or I didn't like how the characters did this, or I didn't like how the plot did this, but I have no reason for you other than it was fine. I enjoyed my reading experience. I wouldn't not recommend it, but I just have not thought about this once since I finished it, nor do I remember that much about it. Like, I remember the basics, but yeah, I don't know, it was a book and I read it and that's it. Also, this is not a standalone. I don't know if it's like a duology, a trilogy, like what the plan is. I know that the second book is out. I don't know if there's going to be more, but I have no desire to continue the series. So this was a 3-star read for me. Again, I have nothing like super negative to say. I can definitely see people loving this, but it just didn't stick with me and it didn't stand out to me. Another one that I felt very similarly about is a book called By the Orchid and the Owl. I came across this one in my TBR jar video from last month. I think the prompt was to read a book that I'd never heard anything about, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong with that, but I went onto Amazon and I was just like looking for books that I had just never heard anything about, and this one popped up as one of the like most wished for books on Amazon at this point in time, and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Read the premise of it, sounded phenomenal, so I downloaded it onto my Kindle and I read it, and I unfortunately didn't love this one. If I'm just gonna be completely honest, it didn't feel super refined. It just wasn't completely, I guess refined is the best word that I can use. Like, it just needed, in my opinion, a little bit of, I don't know, editing, polishing, and I think one of my other main pieces of criticism was that it just felt like a lot of books that I've already read. Like, it kind of felt like the author had taken their favorite parts from a lot of books that they've read and kind of just mashed them into their own book, which I actually don't always think that's a criticism. I think that can be done really well, as I've talked about before, but I personally didn't love how it was done in this book. Basically, this book is about a girl who lives in a small town, and I think when they turn, is it 16? All of the 16-year-olds get taken away to this school. I don't know, every part of it just felt like something that I had seen before, and it didn't feel like it was done better. I think that's the issue. I don't mind if I've seen it before, but it has to be done well. So I did end up rating this one 2.5. I do want to say I don't think it's a bad book at all. I still got all the way through it. I didn't DNF it. Like, I did enjoy parts of it, but it's probably not one that I would go out of my way to recommend. Again, I'm sure there are lots of people who really, really enjoy it, so take my review with a grain of salt. Like, a lot of books that I don't love, a lot of people love, a lot of books that people don't love, I end up loving. Like, it's all subjective, but I obviously just wanted to give you guys my honest thoughts. So moving on. Another one that I don't have a physical copy of is Starling House. I listened to the audiobook of this one. I got it from my library, and this was really good. This is about a girl who lives, or a woman I should say, who lives in a small town, and there's this house that's always kind of been known by everyone in the town as this like spooky, kind of like cursed house where this like mysterious family has lived for multiple generations and no one ever knows what's going on there, and our main character is just like super curious about it, and one day she ends up getting a little bit too close to the house, and the owner of the house not catches her, but just they have an interaction, I guess, and he's just kind of like, what are you doing here? And she kind of gets caught out, and so she's just trying to like make up things on the spot, and the owner ends up offering her a job as a cleaner or like a caretaker of the house. And firstly, he offers her a lot of money, so of course she's just like, well, that would be incredible. She also just like doesn't have a lot of money. She's really struggling to make ends meet, so she would do anything to earn some good money. So she really wants to take the job because of that, but also just to quench this curiosity that she has. So she starts working for this guy in this big house, and the house is kind of magical, it's kind of eerie, it's very spooky. It's just like a lot of you're trying to figure out what's going on. The main character's trying to figure out what's going on, like what's the history of this house, who is this guy who owns it, what's his deal, like it's all just very much like what's going on. But I just had so much fun with it. I was so intrigued the whole time, like I just wanted to know what was going on and like what all the answers were to these questions that our main character had. Just super atmospheric. I gave it 4 stars. I had so much fun. I definitely recommend it. Next, I picked up Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, and I enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty good, but it wasn't my favorite Ali Hazelwood. I do think a lot of her other books for me are stronger and like I've enjoyed them more, but this was still a fun time. I do just want to say I read the ARC copy of this book, which I am so thankful to have been sent. It is such a gorgeous ARC copy. However, one thing that the ARC copy doesn't include, because it's not like the final published version of the book, is the little author's note that says something along the lines of, this book is going to be really spicy and probably spicier than Ali Hazelwood's other books, so go into it with that expectation. And I just like didn't have that little note in my book when I read it, and so I didn't realize that's what I was getting myself into, and so I don't think I went in with the correct expectations. Personally, I'm not someone who enjoys reading a lot of spice. It's not my personal preference, it's not for me, so I just kind of steer clear from books that I know are like heavy spice, because I just know I'm not going to enjoy them, and it's just like not really fair for me to go into a book and like rate a book that I already know is just not my cup of tea, because the chance of me giving it a good review is obviously not very high. So in saying that, this book was really spicy, and I didn't love that aspect of the book. I loved the plot, I loved the characters. I wish we had more of that, because that is the part that I really loved, and I think for me there were just too many spice scenes and we kind of like got in the way of the plot with the spice, and again, that's not something that I enjoy, and it was not something that I really wanted more of, so I rated this book lower because I wanted more of the plot and the love story and the characters. Does that make sense? But that's also not the book's fault, because it has a warning telling people that at the beginning. So I rated this 3.5 because I still enjoyed like the plot side of things. I still enjoyed the characters. It's just not my type of book. It's not my cup of tea. So I think if you like spice, go ahead. If you don't like spice, probably not a book for you. So those are my thoughts on Not in Love. Then I decided to do a reread of Divine Rivals. This was the best thing ever. I loved my reread experience. Obviously I loved it the first time, I gave it 5 stars, but reading it a second time was honestly just as good. I loved it so much. It was just incredible. 5 stars the first time, 5 stars the second time. I love the writing, I love the characters, I love the romance, I love how pure it feels. It just very much feels like the world is getting in the way of the love story, not the characters. Like the characters aren't getting in their own way. It's like the world and the circumstances that are. I just adore this book. But I decided to do a reread of this book because I was determined to finally read Ruthless Vows, which is the second book in this duology, and I did. I did read this. Finally! It came out like 6 months ago, like about time that I read it. I just put it off for a long time because I'd heard really mixed reviews and I didn't want to not like it. But then in one of my videos I was like, guys, convince me to read this. If you loved it, let me know and convince me. And you guys totally did. If you left a comment on that video talking about how much you love Ruthless Vows, you are the reason I picked up this book, because you guys just really convinced me, and I picked it up in my 24-hour readathon and I just absolutely adored it. I do think the first book is better, and that's a hill I will die on, but I still loved this one and it made a lot of sense to me. Like the plot in this just made a lot of sense. It was much more political, less romance. So if you're gonna go into this, I think it's great to go in with the expectations of less romance, more plot, more politics, more fantasy, more war. But in saying that, it was fantastic. I think I'm gonna give this 4.5. Maybe if I keep thinking about it, I'll bump it up to 5. We'll see. But either way, fantastic reading experience. Another book that I read this month is Princess of Souls by Alexandra Christo. This is my second book by this author and it was so good. The first book that I read by this author was To Kill a Kingdom, which is a Little Mermaid retelling, and I think this one is like a Rapunzel retelling, which was really, really fun. I binged this book in 24 hours. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was just a lot of fun. Again, it's not one of those ones that I think I'm just gonna think about forever. It's gonna stick with me forever, but it was just a really fun reading experience and I definitely recommend it. The magic system in this is really interesting. In this one, we're following a girl called Celestra, who is, I guess, like a Rapunzel kind of figure, but I think she's considered a witch, and her magic is being able to tell the future, or like tell when someone's gonna die, something along those lines. And the king kind of like uses her and her mum as well, just as like objects, to be able to help him and be able to give him more power. But then this guy Nox comes in and he wants to get rid of the king. But then Celestra has this moment, I don't know if this will be a spoiler, so I won't like say exactly what happens, but she has this moment where she is like, this guy is in danger and I am also in danger because of him, so we need to work together because we have this kind of connection, and I'm scared that if something bad happens to him, something bad will happen to me. So she is now trying to like protect him even though he's kind of an enemy. It's very interesting, and both the main character and the love interest have like a best friend that kind of come along for like the adventures of this book, which also made it a really fun dynamic. But yeah, it was just really fun. I also love it because it's a standalone. I think it is technically set in the same world as To Kill a Kingdom, but you don't have to read To Kill a Kingdom to know what's going on in this book at all. So if you're on the search for a good fantasy standalone, you don't want to commit to a whole series, this is a great one. And so is To Kill a Kingdom, and To Kill a Kingdom is even shorter than this one, so I recommend both. I need to read some more by this author too. Another book that I loved this month is House of Roots and Ruin by Erin A. Craig. This is the second book in the Sisters of Salt series. I don't know how many books it's going to be total. I know a third book is coming, I think maybe in 2026 maybe, but I read book 1 last month or the month before. House of Salt and Sorrow is the first book, and it's a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and you're following Annalie, which is one of the sisters. And then we have book 2, which is House of Roots and Ruin, and we follow a different sister in that same family. Her name is Verity, and she is, I can't remember if she's the youngest or one of the youngest sisters, but this story is being told like many years after House of Salt and Sorrow. So Verity in the first book is really young, but now in her book she's much older. She's like, ooh, is she like 19, 17? I don't know. She's at the end of her teenage years, and she really wants to go out into society and like date and find a husband and things like that, but her eldest sister Camille, who is her like legal guardian, doesn't want her to, and she's just like super overprotective, and Verity doesn't understand why and is also just like really frustrated. And then she basically finds out why her sister is so overprotective, and she just like gets really freaked out and she decides to run away. So she runs away, she goes to live with this other family who hire her as an artist. They want this portrait done of their son, so she is commissioned to do this work, and that's like her job. She is an artist by trade, and it is just super fascinating because you're finding out all of these weird things and you're not really sure what's going on in this house. You're not really sure who the good guys are, you're not really sure who the bad guys are. You know, there's just like weird stuff happening and you can't tell like what's real, what's not. The first book is very like fever dream-esque, and I would say this book isn't as much like that, but it still has like an element of that, and I just think it was fantastic. I think I liked this book actually a little bit more than the first book, but they're both really fantastic. I recommend both of them. I also want to read more from this author. The next book I read this month was a 5-star. The only new 5-star, because Divine Rivals was 5 stars, but that's a reread. But this was my only like new found 5-star read this month, and it is Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. It was so good. It was just the perfect romance book to me. This one follows Win and Bo, and I don't really know. I feel like I want you guys to just go in blind. They were never planning to be together, but circumstances happen where they end up having to spend a lot of time together, and yeah, there's a romance. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know going into it. Just go in and have a great time, honestly. It was the perfect amount of like, there was a plot going on that I was interested in, but also the characters were both very well fleshed out as individuals, so I cared about them both as individuals as well as like the romance going on between them. Great tension, slow burn, kind of is but kind of not, whatever. I loved all of the side characters. It felt kind of like an Abby Jimenez book to me, I would say. I've read one other book by Hannah Bonham Young, which was Next of Kin, which I also enjoyed but not quite as much, or definitely not anywhere near as much as Out on a Limb. I still need to read Next to You, but Out on a Limb, it was just something else. Like the emotional depth that this book gave me was fantastic. Everything I'm looking for in terms of like the emotional level that I want in a book, found it in this. It was just one of those books where you can just tell that the two main characters, like by the end, they love each other so much. Like their love is so real. You know how sometimes you read a romance book and it ends and you're like, if that was real life, those characters would not end up lasting. Like they would not be together forever. The characters in this book, like you know that if they were real, which they felt so real, they're gonna be together 50, 60 60 years in the future. Like, they were just like best friends as well as so in love with each other. Beau? I adored Beau. I loved both of them, but like, it was just great. I loved it so much. Okay, the last books that I have to talk about, I read them all in my 24-hour readathon, so I'll go through them kind of quickly. But if you want to see like the full reading experience, obviously go watch that video. Firstly, we have Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This was also an incredible book. 4.5 stars. I loved it. Cozy fantasy, a little bit more like slow paced. Not necessarily like a whole lot going on, but it was just a silly, goofy time. I just loved every second of it. I just felt like I was having fun. It's literally just about a girl who is in love with this guy, and then he gets sent away and he just doesn't come home, and she's just like, I'm worried about him. I don't feel like he's doing okay. So she goes to find him, and she has like lived in this small town on this like rock for her whole life, has never like seen anything past this, and suddenly she's like, I'm gonna go explore the world to go find my lover, you know? So she goes on a little adventure, and she also makes a little animal friend, and he can talk, and it's so funny. And she also just like makes friends with all of the people on the crew on this ship that she's on, which is also really cute, but also like makes them enemies. And then it's like, it's a lot going on. Well, is it a lot going on? It's like high stakes but low stakes. It's really like dumb. It's really dumb. Like the humor is really dumb. It's really silly, but it's great. I had a great time. I loved it. So I personally recommend it. I've seen very mixed reviews about it, but yeah, I had a great time. I also read Snow Globe. There's a lot I could say about this book because there was so much going on. I personally feel like they tried to do too much in a short amount of time, and it felt a little bit chaotic and messy to me. I thought the premise was absolutely fantastic, but I just don't think it was executed as well as I would have liked it to have been. And there were just like a lot of parts where I was like, I'm kind of confused at what's going on or who's who. But there were also some parts where I was like, that is so crazy. Like, that is so interesting. So overall, I still think it's good. I don't know if I would recommend it. Like, it's not like at the top of my recommendations list, but it was so interesting and like such an interesting concept that I do want other people to read it. I gave it 3.5 stars. So do with that what you will. It's YA, it's dystopian, it's about a girl who lives in the future where everywhere is cold and freezing and sad and dreary except for the snow globe, and the snow globe is this like dome, and inside the dome everything is just like sunny and perfect, but the only people allowed to live in the dome are like the celebrities who are like actors in the reality TV shows of this world, and the main character gets put in the snow globe to replace one of the actors who has disappeared from the snow globe, and our main character is like the doppelganger of this actor that disappeared. So she gets kind of plopped in there. She used to work in the power plant in the dreary cold freezingness, and she gets plopped into like the perfect life of parties and the glamorous life and sunny beautiful weather, but she kind of realized that the snow globe is not so perfect. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that no one really knows about. So it's definitely very interesting. I also read The Gilded Wolves. This was also just a fantastic read. I had so much fun with this. This is the first book in a series, and we follow a small group. I think there's 5 of them. 5 teenagers who all have skills in different areas. They're like experts in their own little fields, and they come together to complete some missions. Very much like Six of Crows vibes, but it's set in 1889 in Paris. So it's very atmospheric, I would say, very vibey. The characters are so likable. I just really fell in love with them. Great found family, great action. There's just a lot going on all the time, and obviously all the characters kind of have their own little mini story going on, but it's also interconnected. A little bit of romance as well. It's just great. It was just so much fun. I definitely want to continue this series, and I honestly can't wait to read the next book. And lastly, we have This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. This one surprised me so much. I really didn't go into this one with high expectations, but it was fantastic. I really loved it. I had a really great like reading experience, like actually like sitting there and reading it. I was just loving it. I felt like it was easy to read. I was kind of flying through it. I really liked the characters. I really liked the story, all of this sort of stuff. But I will say the more I've reflected on it, the more I'm like, this book definitely took a lot of things that I've seen in other books and just kind of copied and pasted it a little bit. And the book that I feel like there was the most like comparison to in my mind is a book that I really love. It's one of my favorite books, so I can see why I really liked this one, because I also really liked the original book that had a lot of the things that this book did. However, I do feel like that one did it better, and I loved it like way more. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, do I just love it because it had a lot of the same elements as that other book that I really liked? Like, did it really give me anything new? No, but did it need to? I'm not sure. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, that is really reminiscent of another book that I have read. Like, did this author just copy and paste it a little bit. I don't know. Romance books aren't usually that crazy, wildly unique. Like, there's a lot of things that a lot of romance books do, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that really was just like, you know? But do I care if I had a good time? I don't know. I gave it 4.5 stars when I read it. I do think it may be more of like a 4.25. I feel like 4.5 is a bit too high for me, only because I really haven't thought about it that much since. I feel like 4.5 and 5-star reads are books that I like really think about after reading. Like, they really stick with me. So although I had a great time reading, I don't know guys. I'm a little bit, obviously, as you can tell, I'm a little bit unsure about it. I still had a great time reading this. I still definitely recommend it. And I will say one of the things that I really loved about this book, I don't think it's like the best romance I've ever read. Like, I don't think the romance was the thing that like made me really love this. I honestly think it was the character development of our main character and like watching her grow up and like figure things out and just like figure out what she wants and how she's gonna get what she wants and what are the like mature decisions that she has to make in order. Like, does she have to make some sacrifices to be able to do the right thing? And it just felt real to me. I mean, even if it's not a 4.5, it's still super highly rated. I definitely recommend it. But those are all the books that I have to talk about today. I feel like, as always, I've been talking for so long. But I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts on all of these books. I would love to know, as usual, what was your favorite book that you read in June? Let me know, because if I haven't read it, I need to add it to my TBR immediately. But I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.